welcome to another episode of the Jesus Agenda. This week we're going to be discussing three interesting topics in our segments. Our producer is going to be doing something different with these by breaking them up into three parts of one complete episode and releasing them sort of piecemeal over the next couple of weeks. So the topics we're going to be discussing, it's on everybody's mind, the Signal group chat leak. Then we're also going to discuss in our faith or religion segment Paula White and some of the requests that she's recently made or the promises she's recently made. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the culture shift that we're seeing in the culture and whether or not we're going to ask the question whether or not evangelical Christians, maybe particularly evangelical Christians, are actually ready for the rightward turn or the more conservative turn that the culture seems to be heading towards, that is already taken, but that it's heading towards. And then these will be broken up into three separate episodes, and at the end of the week, they'll become one whole episode. So hopefully that will get us, be able to provide you with some sort of mini episodes.
Yeah, to listen to on your commute or whatever,
Yeah, in the morning. So the first thing we're going to talk about is that Signal group chat leak. And so I just want to provide a little backstop or backstory if you haven't been paying attention, although I don't know how you could be alive and not have heard about this at all. But so this is from The Guardian, by the way, which is a UK news source. I purposely chose them because they're from somewhere else. So I always want to see what the rest of the world is thinking. And they start with this line: a major security leak is triggering bipartisan outrage after The Atlantic magazine revealed that a senior Trump administration official accidentally broadcast highly sensitive military plans through a Signal group chat with a journalist reading along. Now, as I understand it, at some point, Goldberg, who's the journalist in question, kind of pipes up and says, I don't think I'm supposed to be on this group chat. And he does kind of pull himself out. And it's actually really interesting that I've noticed some criticism from the left that he should have just stayed in, because isn't that what journalism is really about, being inquisitive and investigative and all this other kind of thing? So I do kind of want to give him some credit for he saw what was going on.
And he kept his mouth shut, by the way.
Yeah, he didn't go blabbing.
He didn't say, the United States has this plan of bombing this.
Right, yeah, which is, again, to his credit. He got some information that he knew he really shouldn't have gotten, didn't go through either the proper channels or the channels that, journalists all have sources that are not necessarily proper channels, but for their vocation and what they do, they're proper channels, right? And he recognized that there was a national security risk, so he wasn't going to do anything beforehand, and he didn't.
So it was my understanding that he didn't say anything until after he didn't say that he was part of the chat until after the attack took place.
Well, he didn't publicly say that.
Yeah, maybe he said something to them.
Yeah, he did in the group chat, according to everything I've read.
Okay.
He did sort of say, I don't think I'm supposed to be on this chat.
Definitely not.
He brought it to their attention, I'm not supposed to be on this chat. And it looks like it was an accident. There's one guy, Mike Waltz is the guy who's taking credit for it, and he's a national security advisor. So it really doesn't make me feel any better that it wasn't Pete Hegseth or somebody else. I mean, Waltz is going. He has the ear of the president on national security, so that's troublesome to me. But there were others on there. Obviously, Marco Rubio was on there. Vice President Vance was on there. Pete Hegseth, of course, the head of the DoD, was on there. And what was discussed in this chat was the plans for military strikes on the Houthis in Yemen, which we know have already happened, but everybody's upset about it. I think rightly so. It's not just a Democrat thing to be enraged about this.
Right.
Republicans are kind of...
You should be upset about it.
You should absolutely be upset about it. On Monday, this was last Monday, Hegseth basically said that nobody was texting war plans, and he attacked Goldberg as deceitful and highly discredited, but he didn't actually refute any specifics from the Atlantic story, which is, kind of eye-opening to me, because he's attacking. That's an ad hominem attack, first of all. which we all know is a logical fallacy. You can't just go after somebody because you don't like them or you don't like their reporting or whatever. It actually made me think of, and I realized that neither Trump nor Pete Hegseth are kings, but it made me think of that passage in First Kings 22 maybe, or it's repeated in Chronicles where the king basically says that he doesn't want the prophet Micaiah, not Micah, but Micaiah, to come and prophesy because he's making war plans.
Yeah.
And he gathers like 400 prophets together, and all of those prophets affirm his plans.
He doesn't want the naysayer.
He doesn't want the one guy to come and he says, I don't want you to go get him because he never says anything good to me.
Yep.
He never prophesies good for me. And then his advisor says, kings shouldn't talk like that. Right? Don't say that. Kings shouldn't talk like that. But I mean, the message is, Pete Hegseth shouldn't talk like that.
No.
You don't want to say, I mean, the guy's basically saying, you guys screwed up. So just own the mistake.
Exactly.
And move on from it.
Exactly. Yeah. I know I voted for Trump, and I believe you did.
Yeah.
But we as Republicans, well, I'm not a Republican, I'm an independent. But as conservatives,
I'm not a Republican either. Officially.
As conservatives, we need to be fair and balanced. And what we mean by that is be willing to call out an obvious mistake.
Right.
This was a screw up. There's only one exception to this, by the way, in the official rules, where you have to use official government platforms. The only exception is if they're contacting a member of another nation state who doesn't have access to the American things. But that isn't what this was.
No,
this was an in the United States, these people talking to each other, and it was a big mess up. They should not have been talking about this on Signal. Bottom line,
this was like an interoffice email.
It's
what it was.
And if this was Biden, all of you Republicans out there who love Trump, rightfully, I might say, would be calling it out.
Well, we have an example of that, right? Because Hillary Clinton's emails.
Yep.
Right, and Trump hammered the email scandal. In fact, the email scandal is probably part of the reason why she lost. It was part of the whole October surprise thing, right?
Yeah.
And rightfully so. She shouldn't have been doing what she was doing either. But you've got to be fair,
intellectually honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's a little bit of added disappointment for me because in the first Trump administration, Trump didn't have any qualms about firing people who made mistakes. Like he just was like, no. But this at least appears like they've just closed ranks, and there's nothing to see here.
Right.
There's nothing going on. There's nothing to see here.
So circle the wagons and just play defense.
Yeah.
And just refuse to admit you did anything wrong.
Yeah. And I don't really like that.
No, I don't respect that.
I would much rather you just come out and say, look, this is the guy that screwed up. Yeah. In this case, it's Mike Waltz. And we're firing him.
If they're just admit that they screwed up, listen, we messed up.
Yeah,
I respect that.
Yeah,
because we all mess up.
And I think that it wouldn't still be in the news cycle. Here we are, over a week later since the Atlantic article dropped, and I mean today is Monday, that the last day of the month of March. They were still talking about it over the weekend. And we're talking about it today, and I'm sure that if you turn the news on, there's still going to be something about it out there. I'm not currently really watching social media, so I don't know, but I'm sure that it's all over social media.
Chad gave up Facebook for Lent,
I did. So. I don't give it up in the sense that I just do it because I know it's a distraction. And
now he just uses twice as much Instagram.
That's right. I don't know. I don't use any social media at all during Lent. I started doing this 2 years ago.
Wow.
So I drop off the
I give up kale.
Yeah. I do that every year. I actually though, you know what? I'm gonna have to. My wife makes this dish, and we don't use kale a lot, but she has a dish that it's like listen, it's got sausage And I'll have to ask her what else it has in it. I hate kale, but she makes it in this, and it's almost like greens and beans, but instead of
she says she ruins perfectly good sausage with kale.
No, she actually ruins the kale with the sausage. It's really tasty.
I'm sure you can ruin kale more than what you ruin.
I don't know. You know what? I'm going to have her make it, and I'll bring it for you. You can try it. You'll have to try it, because this is the only way I'll eat kale, is if she puts it in this thing, which of course defeats the purpose of the kale.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the.
So Chad's wife even makes kale unhealthy.
Yes, that's what we right. Learned. She's Italian. What do you want? They don't make healthy food. The other, it wasn't just the attacks on the Houthis that were included, though. There were comments on this chat about how, like, against the Europeans. Like, one guy said, I'm so tired of bailing out these freeloaders, which I don't necessarily disagree with.
I agree. It's kind of funny.
Call it Europeans freeloaders, but the fact that it was on this Signal chat is a little bit disconcerting.
Another reason why you shouldn't be doing this on Signal.
Another reason why you should be. And then there's also the fact that we know for a fact that both China and Russia have hacked Signal.
Yeah.
And that's problematic because, I don't know what, if any, relationship China has with Yemen. Maybe they do. I haven't really looked into it. Or Russia. But generally, when you start dividing up the Middle East, there's a few places that are sworn enemies, like Iran, that Russia has a good relationship with and China has a good relationship with. So maybe Yemen is the same case. I don't know. But just the fact that whoever started, if it was Mike Waltz or if he's just taking the fall for somebody else or whatever, you should think about, everybody. I know that. And I'm just a guy in Buffalo, New York. What do I know? And I know that China and Russia have both hacked Signal. So just
a Lutheran in Buffalo, New York.
That's right. I'm just a Lutheran in
Basically
Buffalo.
Good for
outside
nothing.
outside of the Holy Land, right? The Lutheran Holy Land of Minnesota and Missouri. This I got this from NBC, and this just kind of says what we were talking about. The White House has closed ranks from the top down. Trump, other cabinet officials like Hegseth, Pam Bondi have either attacked Goldberg personally or the Democrats. National Security Advisor,
which is gaslighting,
right? Which is absolutely gaslighting. Mike Waltz said that he takes full responsibility, but then he went on Fox News and called Goldberg scum.
Yeah.
Come on. I actually think that Goldberg is...
They're mad that he released it at all.
Yeah, they're mad that he released it. But as we pointed out...
Story. Of course
he's
going to release
story.
it.
There's no way a journalist is going to sit on it. But the reality is, I actually give him a lot of credit, like we said at the beginning. I think he took the right approach to it. He didn't release it early on when he could have. He's been very... he's not coming off like an icky paparazzi kind of guy. It's not even like a gotcha moment. It's just like, I just picked up my phone and here I was on this Signal thing, and I thought the American
great story laid in his lap. We
Absolutely, that doesn't happen too often. But I do think that the administration should just own up to it. We talked, I think, a few episodes ago, maybe a couple of months ago, actually, about what God calls us to do in respects to our government. We cited Romans 13. We talked about that a little bit. And I think that there's a Romans 13 element to this, too, because government is called to be God's servant in the earth. And that doesn't matter if we're talking about an empire or we're talking about a king or, in our case, a constitutional republic. And at least in our case, with a constitutional republic, our government,
not a democracy.
Part of being, I guess we should let's say that in long form though. We are a constitutional republic that uses democratic methods or democratic.
But I hate when the media is like, our democracy is under threat.
Yeah. Do you know that now they're saying? And I just read an article about this recently, and I wish I almost sent it to you and I forgot to, where they're saying that that's basically us as conservatives trying to get people to not trust democratic institutions by constantly saying that we are what we are, which is a constitutional republic.
No, I didn't hear that.
We are a constitutional republic that uses representative democracy as the mechanism for how we get things done.
Representative democracy.
Which is different than democracy because, ironically, I had a friend years ago who was a pastor, and he traveled to Cuba with kind of like Pastors Without Borders, like Doctors Without Borders. It's not what their name is, And what their mission was to go and bring health supplies. They bring medicine, they bring, different kinds of things that people don't have access to. And in order to do that, the trade-off with the Cuban government is that first you have to have a handler. Now, this was before. This was like 20 years ago, so I don't know what it's like now since relations have sort of normalized a little bit between the U.S. and Russia or Cuba. But anyway, when he came back, he told us about the trip, and one of the trade-offs is you have to have a Cuban government handler that travels with you everywhere, and you have to take basically the What's Great About Cuban Socialism tour. And one of those things is what they call block elections. Like every block in every city across Cuba has kind of like an aldersman, but it's block by block or so many blocks, and they vote on everything. They vote on, that was the pitch. We vote on everything. We vote on everything. Whatever it is, we vote on. And yet you're still run by a dictator. Yeah. But that is the difference between pure democracy and representative democracy. Representative or pure democracy is one man, one vote, or one person, one vote. Representative democracy
will of the mass.
is the majority is electing this guy or this gal who now has one vote, or they're basically serving as that,
which prevents the whims of masses, which
really makes it. Representative democracy is designed to protect the minority.
Right.
It's not actually government by the majority. It's designed to protect the minority. That's really what the focus is. Okay, so what does Romans 13 have to say to this? The government should be the servant of God. In fact, if you look at the Greek,
to punish evil and reward good.
Right, but if you look at the Greek in that text, it's diakonia is the word that's used, right? Which is, we translate now as deacon, but it literally just means minister or servant. So government is God's deacon or God's minister, God's servant, right? So then the government has a responsibility to own up to its mistakes. In our context, maybe the king doesn't have to own up to his mistakes, but in the context of a constitutional republic, there's a Romans 13 element to this situation or any situation involving government officials, because they represent us, they work for us, then they should own up to this mistake, and they should just say, look, we made a mistake. We're going to move on from this. William Wolfe from the Center for Baptist Leadership, and this will be one of the few times I quote a Baptist on this show. In the eyes of God, the government is his servant. It is both appointed by him and accountable to him. It's critical for Christians to remember this for many reasons, but perhaps primarily because governments so often forget it or reject it. And when they do, a descent into statism is just over the horizon. Now, I'm not saying that this particular issue is going to lead to statism, but it is super important, like you said, that when the Biden administration made similar mistakes, or when Hillary made, the big mistake with the email, we were all in on running over them roughshod. We have to call our own to the carpet at the same time,
and which we will do on this podcast,
and not just go along with it. Yeah. Maybe a good scriptural advice for the administration is from Proverbs 19:20. Listen to counsel and accept discipline.
Chad.
And in this case, it is not just our counsel, but the counsel of people in general who are upset about this. And the second half of that verse is, why do you do this? It's so that you may become wise in your future, so that you don't make the same mistake.
Learn from your mistakes.
Don't make the same mistake twice.
That's right. Well, we'd like to ask you to just consider giving to our podcast. To be honest with you, Chad and I fork the bill, so it would be a huge blessing to us if you would think about. You can either donate on the link that is on the screen. As low as $3 a month would be a blessing to us. If you want to do $3,000 a month, that is also acceptable. But also, if you have a ministry or a business and you would like to sponsor an episode for $20 an episode, send us an email. The email is on the screen, and just shoot us an email, and we will set that up. And for a transition, we will mention your business or your ministry. So please just consider sponsoring us.
And that'll be a good transition for the next topic we want to talk about, which is Paula White.
Oh, this is a good one.
Recent tomfoolery. So we have a video on YouTube that we're going to watch. Maybe you were able to see it. I know you were because you sent it to me. But if you didn't see it, so take a look at this video while Steve and I watch it, and then we'll have some comments for you.
And I believe that when you honor God on Passover, starting on April 12th at sundown through Good Friday on the 18th and concluding on Easter Sunday, you can receive these 7 supernatural blessings for you and your house. According to Exodus 23, God will assign an angel to you. He'll be an enemy to your enemies. He'll give you prosperity. He'll take sickness away from you. He will give you long life. He'll bring increase in inheritance, and he'll give a special year of blessing. You're not doing this to get something, but you're doing it in honor to God, realizing what you can receive.
For your special Passover offering of $1,000 or more as the Holy Spirit leads, you will also receive the beautiful 10-inch Waterford Crystal Cross. Don't miss your moment to release 7 supernatural blessings and provision into your life.
Wow! Wow! You're not gonna. Wow! $1,000, and you get, not only do you get 7 blessings, but you get a Waterford Crystal Cross. Yeah. I mean, I like the angel. I get I get my own personal angel signed, and I get another one, maybe
another one, an extra one, because the Bible does say that we have an angel already.
No, so. But this is a bonus angel.
Yeah, this is a bonus angel,
and as we're going to see in the next video, it comes from Africa.
Yeah, we'll get to that because that just shows what a nutcase.
It's an African angel.
It's an African angel. Or no, actually, it could be Latin American.
And you get an increased inheritance.
Yeah.
So my parents are going to get rich more. Wow.
Wait, doesn't an inheritance work the other way though? You have to. Your parents would be giving you more.
Yeah. Well, they'd have to get richer first.
They have to get rich, and then
I get some more. So that's part of it. So if I give $1,000, I get all this plus a Waterford Crystal Cross.
So maybe people understand why Christians, maybe especially evangelicals, were totally floored that Trump chose her to head up the office of faith.
Can I mention something about that?
Yeah.
I think I know why. If I heard Trump asked one time who his favorite pastor ever was, and he said it was Vincent Norman Peale.
Absolutely. He's the father of all.
Yeah, so he's the father of the word. And he wasn't as bad as them. Don't get me wrong. He was
more of a positive thought guy.
Yeah, positive thought guy, but it grew out of him.
Yeah.
And so Trump comes from that ilk.
Yeah.
Which
is weird because I think he was, I don't know what his relationship with, as far as church attendance was, but they were Episcopalian as far as I've read. I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Vince Norman Peale?
No, the Trump family, like his parents.
Yeah, but he said that was
I think were Episcopalian. Yeah. Well, and Peale's books were popular in the 50s.
Yeah.
So, and he definitely was kind of like the positive thinking.
Yeah.
I would actually put him a little bit more with like Joel Osteen.
What was his popular book called? The Power of Positive Thinking, right?
I think that is the book. Yeah. And I would see him being kind of like Joel Osteen, because Osteen's not technically, I don't know if I would say Osteen is a prosperity preacher. I think he's more, because I don't think I've ever seen him do like a pitch for money that you're going to get a blessing. I always thought he was more in that Norman Vincent Peale, think this way and it'll be this way kind of thing. Like you can live your best life now.
Yeah, your best.
But it's because of your thinking, not because you're sowing money into this thing. But
yeah, I haven't heard him say, "Give me $1,000 and you'll get."
Right. Yeah. Not that I'm defending Osteen, but I want to categorize the heretics, correctly.
Yeah.
Make no mistake about it. Paula White is a heretic, like from top to bottom. And this is just criminal. Forget about her relationship with the government, because this is not an extension of our first segment. This is its own segment on its own, and you could really do like a whole probably 2-hour episode on this garbage. And there's a list of people that we could include with this, but because she has this profile now that's kind of been elevated by her relationship to the administration, it's going to be on people's radars more, right? And here she is essentially, prosperity in and of itself is not what the Bible teaches, period. You can pull a verse out of context. For example, what she's using is from Exodus. There's a particular context to what this is. It's not just, every dollar you give me is going to be matched by heaven.
Yeah, right.
Dollar for dollar.
Oh, more than that.
Yeah. And, nobody thought to tell her that Passover actually starts on April 12th this year, not Good Friday. So I don't know. I think it ends on it ends on Easter Sunday. So Passover starts April 12th and ends Easter Sunday this year. So I don't know if she just meant the whole 7 days. If you drop this money in the bucket.
It doesn't matter. You can give 1,000
any one of those days.
Yeah. She says now between now and Passover, if you're a day late, then you don't get the
blessing. It has to be in by 12:01.
She's the gatekeeper, and she has a special
by 11:59
special deal with God for these days.
It has to be actually 12 midnight, right? Because midnight technically would be the end of the previous day. It has to be in by midnight, April 20th.
It's like a Vistaprint sale.
Are you
You know what I mean? It's like
I love that. It's great.
By midnight tonight.
Awesome. That's awesome. And aside from her terrible hermeneutics and her god awful preaching, some of which we're gonna see a little highlight of. I mean, to me, this is just fleecing the sheep. You're just taking advantage of people. And
manipulation.
How is this any different from the sale of indulgences? It really isn't.
It's not.
I mean, it's the same idea.
It's pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah, it's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
But so I decided, I know that White is a heretic for other reasons, but I wasn't sure what those other reasons were. I've just kind of, bad on me that I haven't really done a deep dive into this particular individual. But I did look up some stuff. Aside from, what's the problem with prosperity in the first place? Is it asserts that it's God's will for believers to be financially wealthy, physically healthy, and successful in all areas of life. Luther called this, and Lutherans call this the theology of glory. It's focusing on that Joel Osteen, having your best life now kind of thing, when Scripture actually calls us to a theology of the cross. I mean, if Jesus suffered and died for us, he even tells us, don't expect your life to be...
In this life you will have suffering, but I have overcome
I've overcome the world, right?
Right.
And she also teaches that faith... positive confession, which would be that Norman Vincent Veal thing, and financially giving, particularly to her ministry, will result in material blessings and personal success.
To give the Chad's church won't work.
Yeah, it's not going to work at my church. Although you should come and give me money anyway. But, but not because you're going to get anything in return. And what does this do? It appeals to the desires of the flesh. It's what we want. We all want to be rich. We all want to be healthy. We all want to, these are the things that which by the way, this would be, I think, a violation of not coveting. We're not supposed to covet.
Not even a Waterford Crystal Cross.
Not even a Waterford Crystal Cross.
Okay,
no.
see.
But we're not. I mean, we're supposed to be that. We tend to look at the commandment against coveting as, as long as I don't look at my neighbor and say, I wish I had his house and he didn't have it, which is a very narrow definition, a correct definition, but a very narrow definition of what it means to covet. When the commandment is really about not being content. That's what the commandment is actually about. This is what God has given you. Be content with what God has given you. If God is really the source of everything you have, which he is, and by the way, he's the source of everything for everybody, not just for believers. He gives this that's what Jesus says, the rain falls on the just and the unjust alike. God is taking care of the whole earth like this, the whole universe like this, and you're supposed to be content with it, which doesn't mean... and we talked a little bit about the Protestant work ethic being sort of a Calvinist thing. It doesn't mean you're not supposed to work hard. You're still supposed to, do your vocation and everything, but be content with where God has placed you. What this prosperity thing does is it appeals to the desires of the flesh. She also emphasizes works, including the saying those positive affirmations and giving. For God's blessings, favor, and prosperity. That's man-centered. It's a works-based message that distorts the true gospel, which says the salvation is by grace alone. Another thing that's really troubling to me, and I just want to get these last two out, and then we can talk about them a little bit, is she's connected to this thing called the New Apostolic Reformation. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it. I don't know what it is.
So there's a guy named Chris Roseborough he has a podcast called Fighting for the Faith, and I think he's like in Wisconsin. He's a Lutheran guy, not in the same group that I'm in. But he goes after these people like big time. Like he goes after not just them, but he goes after all of these teachers like White and Osteen and, you know, Michael Brown and all those kind of guys. But he's really hit hard on this New Apostolic Reformation thing. Their basic premise is that there have to be modern day apostles and prophets, and obviously the guys who make up the New Apostolic Reformation are those prophets and apostles, and that they receive direct revelations from God. White considers her, so I don't know if she's officially one of them, but she's part of the group. And she's made multiple prophecies on political outcomes, on personal success.
Well, she's ever wrong, she has to get killed.
But she's never been right is the issue.
Well,
she's mmade all of these things.
The Bible says.
And she has not been.
God and you're wrong once.
Deuteronomy 18. Yeah. If you say that you're if a prophet of God if you say doesn't come to pass, you got to get rid of him, right? And then lastly, she has her support of the Jewish people precludes evangelization. In other words, she doesn't think the Jews need to be evangelized.
Oh, really? Wow.
In an interview that she gave, she said,
they're just saved because of their Jewish blood.
Well, this is what she said. You tell me how you would take it. I do not want to convert Jews. The plan for salvation for the Jews is God's. So it's a little ambiguous. She doesn't really say what the plan is. Yeah. But to me, it's like it's kind of part of God's secret will or hidden will. We don't know what God's going to do kind of thing. But of course...
How about the book of Acts? Like they literally go...
Right. Well, how about Paul saying I became like a Jew so that I could win Jews?
How about the Great Commission to
go... that's the problem. It's a denial
Judea
of the Great Commission.
And to the end of the age, end of the world.
So she's discouraging evangelism toward the Jewish people, which undermines the Great Commission, but also rejects or neglects the biblical truth that salvation is exclusively through Jesus Christ. And then the last thing I saw that I wasn't sure if I really wanted to cite because it wasn't quite her saying it, but she was participating in some interview with this other guy who's kind of like her. And I don't know his name. It's terrible of me, but you could probably, I would assume you could go on YouTube and search the term Paula White denies that Jesus is the only begotten Son of God. And what it actually is that this guy says, he does say it, that Jesus is not the only begotten Son of God. And she agrees with it. Oh. And what they're doing is they're saying that you and I are begotten sons of God.
Oh,
right?
gosh.
So it's a confusion of terms. Mm-hmm. And, obviously, by the way, this is what happens when you follow pastors who got their theology education out of a Cracker Jack box. Or didn't get anything at all. I mean, like T.D. Jakes was a vacuum cleaner salesman before he.
What about Special K? That's what I got.
Special K.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Special K, but not Cracker Jack.
I actually went to a Presbyterian.
Yeah, right. Well, and so you would have had.
Really and I came out of it not Calvinist.
I
came out of it more not Calvinist.
But you would have had really high standards, though. I mean, the Presbyterians are known for having very high standards of their seminary. So. But a lot of these guys, they just say, well, I got a call, and that means I can go do this. No, that's really not how it works. First of all, the call comes from the congregation, not just from you and God, not just from God telling you, and if it's God calling you, then just go out in the parking lots of Walmart and preach. You don't need a church for that, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's lots of trouble here with Paula White and what she's doing. And I don't know. I don't know how is it just, you think it's like, is there a psychological, you know how they say like, women who are abused tend to not leave their abuser. Is that why you think these guys can still be so popular? Because, I mean, they're abusing their people.
They're sensational.
Yeah.
That draws people. These people want something in life that's mysterious because it makes life exciting.
Yeah.
Right. So these people offer this mysterious, like you're on the brink of some huge blessing.
Right.
And if you just do one more step of faith, you'll be there.
Yeah.
And we have another video.
It just feels like grift to me.
Yeah.
All right. So we're gonna watch this other video. This is Paula.
This one's great.
Paula in her element, not the polished up Paula asking for money. Hold on.
Strike and 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 strike until you have victory. For every enemy that is aligned against you, let there be that we would strike the ground, for you will give us victory, God. I hear a sound of abundance of rain. I hear a sound of victory. I hear a sound of shouting and singing. I hear a sound of victory. I hear a sound of an abundance of rain. I hear a sound of victory. I hear a sound of an abundance of rain. I hear a sound of victory. The Lord says it is done. The Lord says it is done. The Lord says it is done. For I hear victory, 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 victory in the corridors of heaven. In the corridors of heaven, victory, 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 victory. For angels are being released right now. Angels are being dispatched right now. Hamanda aka ata raka teda baka sanda ata ambo osa kata rite eke banda ata rike didi ashata. For angels have even been dispatched from Africa right now. Africa right now. Africa right now. From Africa right now. They're coming here. They're coming here. In the name of Jesus. From South America. They're coming here. They're coming here. They're coming here. They're coming here. From Africa. From South America. Angelic forces. Angelic reinforcement. Angelic reinforcement. Angelic reinforcement. Pika hata anda ata. Ora bata rata ande eke eke manda rasata. For I hear the sound of victory. 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 I hear the sound of victory.
Aka shaka raka maka maka Mr. Roboto.
So,
I don't know what that was about.
So who was the dude just walking back and forth behind her?
He's kind of ruining it.
Yeah, I'm like, what was his purpose in the whole thing?
Yeah, and I
was
didn't
he doing like one of those Jericho walk kind of things? You know,
he was getting his Waterford Crystal Cross.
Is that what it is?
He gave $1,000.
I mean, that is insane. Like, I can't imagine.
It was kind of catchy though. I hear the sound of victory.
I was going to say,
I hear the sound of victory. Robaka maka shaka laka
I hear the coming of rain. I hear an abundance of rain.
Angels from Africa and South America.
Even her tongue speaking was like in rhythm.
I know. Like, she has a very good sense of rhythm, definitely.
Yeah. Well, we'll give her that.
We'll give her that. We'll give credit where credit's due. The
main thing is that this is terrible stuff. I mean, we could go on, making fun of that last clip because it is funny. And you know, there's obviously both of us have theological qualms about all of charismatic Christianity, but the real issue is that she's a con artist, and I feel for people who aren't able to see that, and I hope that if there's any releasing of bondage at all, which I know she likes to talk about, it would be that people would be released from whatever witchcraft she has them under, so that they can keep their money and not get taken by this kind of crap. You know, it's nuts. Okay, so now Steve mentioned it in his first pitch for support, but just to again mention, if you would like to sponsor an episode, we're going to put up our email. If you have a church, a business, or if you're just a supporter who wants to advertise even just a positive message, I think Methodists do memorials too, don't you? Mm-hmm. Don't you have memorials?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we both come from church traditions with memorials. So, hey, if you've had a loved one that's passed away and you just want to flash their name up in memory, this episode is sponsored in memory of so on and so forth, or in honor of a student or a spouse or whatever.
Or in honor of Paula White.
Yeah, or in honor of Paula White. Just send us a check for $20.
$1,000.
Not made out to Paula White.
Promise 7 awards.
And do it on that email, and we'll get your details from you, contact you, so that we know what you want us to do, and we'll take care of that in our next episode. Okay.
We're giving out wooden crosses.
Wooden crosses. We're going to give DJ's cross out. We're going to give you this pewter or pewter-like cross for a gift of $3,000.
Also makes a good weapon. It's heavy.
This will help you with the zombie apocalypse. That crystal thing is not going anywhere. Okay, so finally, to wrap up our segments and wrap up our show, we have this really great article that I don't know if Steve wants to introduce and where it came came from, and then we can kind of discuss it and what this is about.
Yeah, it's an article called All Grace, No Nature, the subtitle, Evangelicalism is not ready for the culture's rightward shift, and it's by, is it World Magazine?
Yeah, it's World Magazine.
Okay. That's what it says.
Which is a good publication.
Yep. Yeah, so what he's talking about briefly in this is, we've all seen a cultural shift. It's kind of a relieving thing, I think, in a lot of ways, and
right.
it's very encouraging to see, and where the culture is starting to shift away from the LGBTQ and everything's racist, la 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 thing, and all those kind of things that. As I whack the microphone, and the whole thing that he's saying in this article is that evangelicals are not ready for this shift.
Yeah.
And go ahead, tell it.
Yeah. So I think maybe to backpedal just a little bit on that, one of the reasons why this is concerning is because all the research indicates that Gen Z is forecasted to become the most conservative generation on record.
And I think we mentioned that last.
Yeah, we talked about it. Well, we were talking about that in terms of church attendance.
Yes,
but this is, I would say,
trend.
Culturally, socially, politically conservative. And this is particularly true, according to the article, of young men who are decidedly more conservative. And he gives some explanation here of like, why is this the case? And it's because the left overshot, and essentially progressivism went too far. It assumed that everyone would accept social progressivism's fascination with identity, inclusion, political correctness, and simply overwhelm the opposition owing to the cultural majority that elites enjoy. So they just figured that everybody was going to, once we let them know. For years you heard this from the left, that as soon as the rest of the country is as educated as we are, this is the way it's going to go. Mm-hmm. The reality is that it's just not the case. Mm-hmm. And that's what's kind of happened with this younger generation. They become disillusioned with progressivism. They're questioning the social dogmas of the progressive movement. And as part of that, they're reconsidering traditional values. I mean, if you were to go on YouTube, for example, type in the trad wife movement and see how many young women want to be traditional wives again.
Yeah.
And by traditional wife,
mentions that in the article too.
Yeah, and by traditional wife, what do we mean? We mean the homemaker, the person taking care of the child, the traditional gender role that always existed.
Yeah. There's a big fad in that right now.
There's a huge movement, and they're all the younger millennials and Gen Z, mostly Gen Z, but there are some on the cusp of that, those two generations that are jumping onto that. And again, not just roles, but the ideals. These younger people are re-exploring the masculine ideal, the feminine ideal, and they are once again desiring order and permanence. And we talked about this in relation to institutions. Part of wokeism was to categorize institutions as oppressor or oppressed so that you could then get rid of the oppressor institutions.
Yeah.
But the younger folks are like, wait a minute, this just is not my lived experience.
Yeah.
And so they're looking for the institution to come back or to kind of
saying that institutions aren't all bad.
Right. Institutions are not all bad. And even within that, and I don't remember if we really discussed it in the church attendance thing, but even within the church attendance movement that we're seeing an increase among younger people of church attendance, a lot of those are going to the more traditional churches, the churches that have a stated liturgy, that are sacramental, that are, holding on to sort of traditions, lowercase t, of the historic church. There is a definite move that way. And I know I've seen articles recently about young men especially becoming Eastern Orthodox, but we're really seeing it across the board in the liturgical churches.
And in the Roman Catholic Church, the Latin Mass is picking up.
Oh, yeah.
Huge.
And when you go to a Latin Mass, you know what's there? Families.
Yep. Yeah.
Young families with 7, 8 kids, 5 kids, 4 kids. And you know,
and there's a lot of reverence for the Eucharist.
There's a ton of and you would think if you're going to the mass that has all the young kids that it would be a screaming mass, and it's really not. It's These are families that are really taking things very seriously. And so basically what he says is evangelicals are not ready for this because evangelicalism has failed probably for the last 100 years, but maybe especially for the last 50 to 60 years, has failed to speak affirmatively of creaturely instincts that progressives have been attacking for decades.
Yeah.
To me, and I'm going to make sort of a really broad statement here. I have long felt that American evangelicalism is really Gnostic. And let me explain how I think that works with this. So first of all, why is American evangelicalism Gnostic? Because it spiritualizes everything. That's the first thing. Mm-hmm. On the extreme ends, it's hyper spiritualized. So that's when you get into like the charismatic stuff, and I don't even mean just the nutty people like Paula White. I mean sort of like the norms of the charismatic movement is a hyper spiritualization of things.
Yes.
That's the definition of what it is to be Gnostic. Mm-hmm. So then how that relates to this is that essentially evangelicalism has nothing positive to speak to in terms of the created order, other than saying, that we support traditional values. Well, what does that mean? You support traditional values. Yeah. What is the role of husband and father? How do you live that out? And how is and when you're kind of like going along to get along, like these are our values, but we're not going to force them on the culture.
Exactly. Which what they've done.
Why don't we realize that there is good in the created order, not just for the church, it's for everybody. That's why it's part of the created order.
Right.
When we talk about, now I don't know what your position is on this, but I get a lot of requests for weddings outside of the church from people that are not, I do not require that both, I do not require that, I will not marry a Christian to a non-Christian.
Okay.
I don't require that the two people both be my kind of Christian. They don't have to be Lutherans. They don't even have to be from the same tradition. Like I'll marry a Lutheran to a Methodist or a Catholic or something like that.
Methodist?
Yeah, absolutely, But I won't marry a believer to a non-believer. And there's a reason, because I think Paul won't allow me to participate. I think when Paul says don't be unequally yoked, it is your responsibility to make sure you're not. But I'm not going to put my stamp of approval on it if you are. But I will marry two non-believers to each other.
Because they're equally yoked.
Well, yeah, but they're equally yoked, but also because marriage is a creation.
Right.
It's a right of creation. Right. It's not something that the church owns.
It's not something only for Christians.
Right. It's not just for Christians. And so we have evangelicals, they basically have, what they've done is they've said, okay, so all of these traditional values that we stand for they're okay for us, but we're not going to make you do it. It's not for society as a whole. So they don't really have anything to say. If the culture begins to shift, they have nothing to say to that culture because they've already surrendered that ground.
Yeah.
They've said, what do they say things like, we live in a post-Christian culture. Okay, well, that's true to some extent. The culture has been post-Christian in terms of they don't all go to your churches. But we discussed this, by the way, in our culture segment a few weeks ago, that the culture in America is still Christian. It's still a Christian culture. Because of how culture is actually defined. What the evangelicals have done is they've essentially said, because the loudest voices in the culture are those who are progressive and it looks like the country's going in that direction, we're just going to have our Christian schools, we're going to have and don't write and say Christians that I think Christian schools are bad. I don't. But we're going to have like this, we're going to be separate but equal kind of thing, right? Like segregation almost. We're going to self-segregate ourselves, and these things are for us. And we're not going to try to shape the culture in any way, shape, or form, so that it reflects these values. So they've lost the ground already.
Yep. Let me read one paragraph from this based on what you're saying. This is a good point to read it. This is says, so when the culture, weary of chaos, begins to grope back towards its outer boundary, natural law violations, evangelicalism will fumble unless we relearn the value of nature. We must be able to affirm the goodness of maleness and femaleness, which is what you're saying we've kind of haven't done.
Right.
The goodness of hierarchy and authority, the goodness of limits, the good of the family, the good of conscience and moral law. And then lastly, this is why many evangelicals find themselves uncomfortable with the language of authority, duty, or rootedness.
Right, absolutely. And if you go back, the paragraph above, I must have underlined multiple things in here because essentially the story for evangelicals goes from the fall to the cross. That's what he says in the article.
He says that straight there.
And that really is kind of evangelicalism in a nutshell. It goes from, oops, we made a mistake, to this is how it's rectified. And there's no discussion about the good of creation.
Right.
And I wondered kind of like, where does that come from? Is it because evangelicals are by and large separated between Arminianism and Calvinism, and the Calvinist view is that mankind is totally depraved, creation is totally fallen, and all that kind of stuff. For Lutherans, it's a different view. We're not quite. We definitely don't believe in total depravity. I think if we were to use a word,
I think the Calvinist view is more utterly depraved.
Utterly depraved.
You know what I mean?
Even though they say it's totally depraved.
It's like there's no good left.
Yeah.
But Methodists, we don't believe that. We believe there is good.
Right, I was going to say, I don't think
creation is a good. Our existence is a good.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that would be more in line with what Lutherans, how Lutherans understand the created, not just creation, but the created order. These are good things. Why are they good? Because God is good and God made them. God can't make things that are not good. Now, these things have been disturbed.
I believe sin's touched everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
And that's where I would say, I don't want to speak for Lutherans writ large, but how I would describe sin's effect is total corruption. I would say everything is corrupted, including myself. But that doesn't mean that everything is by nature not good. It means that all good things have been corrupted, including human nature, including the created order, including institutions, including hierarchy, including authority, including so what we
that doesn't
actually
mean they're not
see,
good. It doesn't mean there's no good in them.
It doesn't mean they're not good. And so essentially what evangelicals did is, because they don't have any language to talk about those things outside of a church context, and maybe because look, there's been a lot of scandals in the last probably 25 years in evangelical circles that have to do with authority and have to, like, an abuse of authority. Like you think of Mark, who was that guy, Mars Hill guy? Mark Driscoll. That was an authority issue. Then you have somebody like Ravi Zacharias who had a sexual issue, and a lot of these things, and maybe that's why they shy away from it. I don't know enough about historical evangelical theology, and by that I mean like from the 50s backwards, maybe, to the 1800s, to know like what was their position on things before, because I don't think they really existed, right? I mean, evangelicals were basically people in mainline traditions. It wasn't like their own separate thing. So they just don't have the language. They don't have the language to deal with it. But he goes on in this and he says they don't have consideration of what original created nature was for. What was it? What was the purpose of it? So they don't have the capacity to speak about the created world as being good in itself. So they can't present these values as something everybody should adopt.
I mean, the Westminster Confession says man's chief end is to glorify God.
But that would be reformed, though. I wouldn't class them as.
I know, evangelical.
Yeah, I wouldn't class them as evangelical. I mean,
but a lot of evangelical come out out of that. And
absolutely. Yeah. But how far out of it is the problem?
It's been hundreds of years.
I would say that. Only the most conservative Presbyterians really pay any attention to the confessions of the Reformed movement, right? Same thing with, churches like the Dutch Reformed Church, Christian Reformed Church. Do they even pay attention to the canons of Dort and all that kind of stuff? I don't know. I know that there's a couple Reformed denominations who clearly do.
Yeah,
they tend to be the more conservative groups. So the evangelicals themselves, I mean, when I think of evangelicals, Most of the evangelicals I'm aware of, most of the, let me classify this right.
Like non-denom and stuff.
Well, but yeah, I would say non-denominational pretty much come from the Baptists. The Baptists, by and large, are independent churches, right? I mean, the most Baptists don't belong to a denomination,
right?
Or they belong to something like the SBC, which technically is not a denomination.
It'll be interesting to talk about the David Platt thing with that in mind.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
But then I would say the vast majority of the rest of the evangelical world is descended from Wesleyanism to some degree. Not
a lot of it comes out of Wesleyan.
Yeah, not necessarily the Methodist Church proper or the historic Methodist Church, but some form of Wesleyanism, you know. And so I don't really know, how connected are they to, if you're in the Wesleyan Church, which is like 2 rungs down the ladder from
they are
Methodist
loosely
Church.
Connected with Methodism,
right? So they don't. So how much do they really know about what those confessions actually say? But the biggest issue for me is that I think, like I said, I think that the Gnostic nature of American evangelicalism prevents them from being able to see this stuff, which is all material, which is all created, which is human institutions, which is connected to the wider culture, how they can see that as good. And if they don't have the language for it, they're not going to be able to say to the culture, hey, you should do this too, because it's good. It's good for your kids. It's good for the culture. It's good for the nation.
Without saying just because.
Without saying just because.
Yeah.
So I did want to mention it because we had talked about this, and this could be a possible framework for it. First of all, I'm really glad to hear that Methodists share this view, because for Lutherans, we just automatically believe that because God's good, creation has to be good. Using Genesis 1, obviously. And for Lutherans, God is continuing to create. His sustaining of the world is part of his creative act in the world, and that he gives us orders of creation, or created orders, which refer to our social structures,
which the scriptures speak of.
Our relationships, family, church, the state. Luther, we use the small catechism today to train our confirmands, but that's not why Luther wrote it. He wrote it for pastors to train their congregations and for fathers to train their kids.
Interesting.
That's what the catechism was meant for. He went on a trip. This was kind of like in the middle of the Reformation, as churches were peeling off and becoming part of the Lutheran movement, the evangelical movement, as it was called then. And he went what's called the Church Visitations, and he came back and he was like flabbergasted. He's like, I can't believe how messy this really is. These priests don't know anything about the gospel at all. They have no clue. So he wrote the Small Catechism for that purpose, and we just don't use it rightly anymore. I mean, mostly because parents don't teach their kids anymore. They just leave it to the pastor. But all of this stuff, he calls the family the micro church. It's the family is the basic unit, not just of the society, but of the church. So this training and this stuff should be happening in the family. And then how does that affect the culture? Well, each of us has a vocation, and we have a responsibility. And this is one of the unique contributions of Luther to the wider Christian world. That you don't have to be a priest, a monk, a nun to have a vocation from God. Right. The farmer has a vocation. The mother. The mother has the highest vocation. In fact, there's one quote that I'm going to butcher where he says that a mom changing dirty diapers has done more for the Lord than 1,000 popes sitting on 1,000 thrones. Yeah. And what sin did is that it disturbed this inherently good creation that ultimately disrupted the natural order. In the back of the Small Catechism, there's a thing that was added on at the end a number of years later, called the Table of Duties. And it's literally just are you a father, a mother, a pastor, a bishop, a worker, a boss, whatever you are, whatever your station in life is, this is what Scripture says you're supposed to be doing in that vocation, always with an eye towards serving your neighbor. Because that's really what it's about. God doesn't need you to serve him. He needs you to serve your neighbor. That's what he wants you to do. Yeah. And so I think that I would like to see, maybe evangelicals listen to more of us who come from traditions that maybe have something to say about this, or not just evangelicals. I think it's important for that because they have control of the airwaves. But I think it's important for us to make sure that, and for you and I, and maybe for our churches, nothing really changes, right? I mean, we just go on being who we are, and maybe people are attracted to us because of that. And I know I said this on that one episode where we talked about attendance, but all of the growth that my church has had in the last 2 years has been people in their 30s, couples in their 30s who have children. And it's not like we've had exponential growth, right? Yeah. I'm just saying that everybody we've
if you're growing,
in,
you're already ahead of most churches.
Yeah,
most are shrinking.
And actually, in April, we're bringing in two couples, and one of them is a younger couple, the other is an older couple. That's because they're part of the diocese here, and their parishes are being shut down. So they, but in any case, for us, nothing changes, right? We're still going to talk the way we talk, and how these things are good for the whole culture. They're good for the nation as a whole, not just for, Christians in their little corner. We're not Amish. So, well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure to share it, like and subscribe to the YouTube page, like and subscribe to the Facebook page, and send this out to your friends, and we'll see you again real soon. God bless.